All right, we're going to get started. Today's IGU is on time management and managing priorities. So thanks for having me lead some IGUs this summer. I'm Jennifer Little. I am an instructor at UT Arlington as well as a PR consultant. I have spent most of my career on the agency side at 3 different agencies, so I know the world that you live in very well. And so hopefully I can give you some guidance and advice for helping manage time. So let's start. So first, I found an interesting article last fall on time and communication, and specifically how we use time as power over other people. And I want to set the stage with that because I think it's really important. If we understand how sometimes we use and abuse time, it will help us better manage our time. And so this article talked about, in relationships, we use time as a currency with unconscious intentions. So think about the times when you get a text message or, some kind of call from somebody that took a little longer than expected. And instead of actually looking at what the message was, you look at the timestamp and say, gosh, why did it take them 3 hours to respond to my text? That must mean this person doesn't really like me as much as I thought because it took them so long. And you completely read into the time rather than what they said, which was, I want to see you tonight, or whatever it is, right? And so we know that to be true in relationships. And so it's interesting to think about how we look at that for work. We punish people by making them wait. I'm not going to respond because I am mad right now about this. Because they did this to me, so now I'm going to do this to them, right? And again, I'm not saying we do that in this room, but think about times when that maybe went through your head. But we're definitely influenced by the way that we communicate and send messages through the ways we and others treat time, okay? So we're influenced by and send messages through the way we and others treat time, okay? So the way that you respond or don't respond sends a message. And I put a link to the article that you can read, which is really interesting. There are scholars that actually study time and communication, and they made some observations. And we're going to go through a couple of those to set this up. First of all, managers typically don't discuss time. So what does that mean? Here are the observations. Managers don't discuss their beliefs or expectations around time. What's normal for you might not be normal for someone else. Some leaders don't want to be clear on time with their team intentionally, right? And then lack of clarity on time affects how people manage and prioritize time. Okay, so think about when you were hired, were you given exactly a perfectly clear picture of how much time you were going to work during the day? Maybe you were told, well, these are our business hours, but you probably weren't told. I know an agency front, I would probably never tell people you're going to work this amount of time in a day, right? And so we're intentionally unclear sometimes because we don't want to scare people off. But think about expectations of, am I expected to work on vacation? Am I expected to respond at night? And this is certainly true now with all of our instant messaging and, Slack, right? Are you supposed to respond? Is that the expectation? I mean, so-and-so does, but that's not normal for me, right? So again, when we don't discuss these things, there's a little bit of a problem. So what are the suggestions for that? Managers should think about what they want and say it, right? I used to have a manager that said, I don't want you working on vacation, okay? I don't want you to. I had another manager that said, well, I work on my vacation. I mean, everybody has to, right? So I knew a little bit about what the expectations were. So we want to be clear with people. Decide what's urgent and what's not. Help your team understand how to prioritize, okay? Does it have to be done tonight at 11 o'clock, or can it be done the next morning, okay? And then communicate those expectations about time, commitments, weekends, vacations, right? again, it's really hard, and I deal with this a lot now, especially with a team that I work with that's on the West Coast, and they want to do calls with me at 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock their time all the time. Well, for me, I'm trying to get my son fed for dinner and do things, but again, and then we have a call later that night with our client who's in China. So again, the time is just sort of what happens in our business, but I need to schedule my day to account for that, to know that I'm going to be heavy on a lot of work during this key part of the day. And then be clear with deadlines, right? So again, somebody may send you a message, an email or a Slack, right, that says, I need you to take care of this. In your mind, you may be thinking, now at 7:30 at night, or when I have a ton of other things to do, but what they really meant was, oh, it's not due till next week. But they didn't say that, right? So we can be very clear. The next observation, some people abuse time, okay? The boss's time is most valued. The higher the level, the more you have to wait on them. Waiting can be painful and cause work delays. The person in authority doesn't have to apologize for delays. I always think about when I go to the doctor's office and they sometimes have a long wait and it's long, you know, an hour and a half, and then they come in sometimes like nothing ever happened, like it's no big deal, that you just had to wait on them for an hour and a half when my appointment was at a certain time, right? It's just expected, and it's not okay, right? So again, I think in the workplace, we have to think about, is it okay to make people wait on us? Are we late to meetings? And sometimes it's going to happen, right? But we can get ahead of it. And so here's some suggestions, right? Respect the time of those above and below you. Apologize for time delays. Just a quick, I'm sorry I'm running late, right? Would go a long way. Plan ahead to avoid schedule changes, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk about our to-do lists and our scheduling. And think about how your action will affect your team and your client. So you making people wait, not getting to something, whatever it may be, has a trickle-down effect. And I know we've all probably felt that. The next observation, with technology, work is always on, okay? Instant messaging, okay? It's both convenient and intrusive, right? We know it's easy just to send a little message on Slack, get an answer, but then those little, dings are really interrupting my writing time, okay? We're expected to answer quickly all the time. The first people that respond, the first responders, usually set the tone. So like you feel pressure, like if somebody's already responded, well then I've got to respond because they're going to make me look bad if I don't hurry up and respond. And then there could be some confusion of how to reach people. In other words, your boss may not really want to be connected on Slack as much, right? Or the person you're working with, it's better if you text them something, okay? And especially if they're not where you are. And we had that a lot. I'd have a client that said, just text me. Don't call me, don't email me, just text me, right? And part of this is learning how people best respond and can be communicated with. So some suggestions here. Respond to others to help others move forward and acknowledge receiving this status, okay? Maybe you can't get to it, but maybe just a simple, hey, I got this. I'm going to send you the info in an hour, okay? So just really quick responses so they are not sitting there waiting on something. Know what to communicate via instant message and what to take offline. Get up from your desk and walk over for the quick question and then come back, right? Now maybe that person's door is shut and you can't go in, and that's a sign that you shouldn't do that. But other times you could probably move things along really easily, especially if you're in an office together with people. If you're not, think about how the best way to reach them is. And then tell team members when a response is needed, okay? So instead of, hey, can you do this? I need this from you. Give some parameters, say, just by end of day tomorrow. All of a sudden, that's going to take a little bit of, pressure off of that person who's going to see it and all of a sudden get tense about, oh my gosh, I have all these things on my list. How can I add this on there today when they didn't mean today? They just meant whatever that deadline was, 24 hours, 2 days. Let's discuss it in Monday's status call, right? So put some time parameters around that so you don't freak out your team members. And then the last sort of observation was the delays actually aren't always negative, okay? So of course, the higher a person's status, the more time they get to respond. This is typical thinking. The slow response is used as power over others, but means that assignments can get delayed. Unresponsiveness is frustrating and many times due to lack of information, okay? So our tendency is to think someone's not responding to me and it's bad. Either it's because they don't like me, because they're mad at me, and a lot of times it's because at work, they don't have the information yet. And I find myself doing that a lot where I get an email and I'm like, oh, I don't have an answer that yet. So what do? I just don't respond. And then that other person is waiting and waiting when I could have just said, I'm actually not expecting to get that information until tomorrow morning, so I'll get with you then. Boom, that person has their answer, right? So again, there's a lot of reasons behind sometimes why we don't respond, and we don't want to jump to conclusions. So some suggestions: don't read into other person's lack of response. Don't immediately think they're trying to sabotage your job or your work, okay? Be positive about how you interpret time and behaviors. Try face-to-face communication to avoid slow response times, right? You know that person is sitting 20 feet away from you and is not on the phone or in a meeting, and you can pop over for the quick question, or you know that person is off-site or traveling. I think I'm going to text them because that's probably the best way to reach them, okay? But then don't assume that everybody's available when we are either, right? Acknowledge messages of the status instead of withholding a response. Again, I'm gonna kind of mention this a couple times. Everybody is busy, right? That is probably the biggest theme ever working in an agency. We're all busy. So, it's not an excuse not to respond, but we have to assume that people are working on things and they are just not sitting there at their computer waiting desperately for your Slack message. They're not, they're working. Okay, so how does this all relate to time management? Managing your time and priorities is difficult without expectations. Everyone communicates differently, but there needs to be some kind of discussion and normalization, right? And so this can start with your team leaders, your managers, account leads, can talk about and tell you how they want to be communicated to. I used to know exactly how to reach every single one of my clients and my leaders, right? They needed to be communicated to in a certain way. It's all different. Frustrating, but that's the world. Using time as power isn't healthy for the team, okay? We're in the business of time and people, so we have to respect them. And if you set that, if you know that going into it, I'm going to respect people's time, they're going to respect mine. Your ability to manage your own time is going to change. It's going to shift. I think you'll see that. And as we go into some of the tips for time management, you'll think, wow, if I just knock this out and do it, respond, that keeps work going, it keeps growing. Any questions so far? Any of those observations feel very real to you and you have felt that from people? We're not going to, of course, name names or anything, right? But we've all felt it, whether it's here, whether it's someone else, whether it's in our personal relationships. We've all done it, right? We've all abused it. We've all been on the receiving end of it. And I think now that we recognize it, I love this article because it blended both some personal examples and some professional ones to make you think like, wow, I do that. I'm a bad person. No, it's just now that I'm more aware, I'm going to fix it.